You all received the notes, by the way, that I sent today?
Yes.
Okay. I sent notes on the listening meeting, just so you want, in case you wondered.
Yeah.
Chair Giorgio, you are live on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. All right. I'll call this meeting to order 7:08 p.m. on October 6th of 2021. Let's start with roll call. I'll just call out your name and you can say, present or here. Stella Witherspoon.
Here.
Greg Brown.
Here.
Lynn Hedane.
Hello, here.
I'm Carl DiGiorgio. I'm here too. Also attending are Mike Moran, and in the background is Therese. Thank you for your help. I don't think we have any. Start again. A motion to adopt the agenda.
I so move.
Second.
All right. I'll just call your names out. Greg.
Aye.
Stella.
Aye.
Lynn.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So the agenda is adopted as it is. Let's start now with public comments. This is public comments on things that aren't on the agenda. And if I see at least one raised hand, so if you, and there's more, so if you can bring them in, and you have 3 minutes to tell us what you think or ask questions. Items not on the agenda.
First speaker is Abby Bateman. Go ahead, Abby.
There you go.
Ooh, I'm sorry, that's really bad. Sorry. Wait. Don't want to blind you with that light. I don't want you to suffer the poor lighting in my house the way I do. Good evening, commissioners and staff. I'll make this quick. I just wanted to jump on and just to let you know that I would like you to support a Vision Zero policy and approach with City Council. And I know Vision Zero has a range of tools in the toolbox to be used, and some are low-hanging fruit and some are easy. And I guess my request is for you to do the deeper dive. That certainly let's do easy things, but also look at bigger solutions that might address some of the system problems that we have in our city in terms of how our roads are configured. I also do think that, and I'll comment more on this on the other item, but just that enforcement does play a role. And we have heard from Chief Aldrich that he doesn't do enforcement of certain types of things. He mentioned this at the town hall in Burton Valley and did not seem to indicate that that was a policy that was going to change. So when we look at enforcing the current speed limits and safe driving, as well as perhaps future changes, we'll need to see enforcement follow through with that as well. So I think my take-home message is I support Vision Zero, and I'd like to see the commission work with council to realize these safety improvements in our community. Thank you.
Lynn, go ahead.
Yeah, could I ask Abby a question? Exactly what is Vision Zero?
So that's a great question. It is a whole program, and actually at the next city council meeting, I believe the executive director of CCTA is Tim Hale is going to be making a presentation. So he is really, he'll be able to provide more information on that. Megan Mittman is also one of the national experts on Vision Zero and street safety. And so I would recommend using her as a resource as well. But really it's a philosophy that really our vision should be zero accidents, zero deaths. And when we do have accidents, they should be reduced to a point where they're not fatal, or I shouldn't say accidents. When we have collisions, they should be not fatal. And so it is an approach to managing our streets and how streets are constructed with a priority on safety. So I apologize, I can't speak more specifically, but there are lots of resources online as well as
Yeah.
resources being brought to bear at council.
Thank you for that, Megan. Mentioning Megan, but I was going to mention that Tim Hale is going to speak on the next. He's going to do a presentation, and so we're all going to be listening into that very carefully. Lynn, you wanted to follow up?
No, what was the name of the fellow again from the CCTO?
Tim Hale, H-A-I-L-E.
Oh, Hale. Okay. And what is his capacity?
He's the executive director of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, CCTA.
He's the what instructor?
He's the executive director.
Oh, executive. Oh, he took.
Or
Okay.
is that
At the place of some other people.
Lynn, there's
Right.
I will send you a note, but there was a note in your email about it today. So you may have not seen that yet. So,
Okay.
all right. Thank you very much, Abigail. Abby, anybody else questions? I do appreciate you raising that. That was something I was going to mention later. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I know it's been a long haul recently, so I appreciate everybody sticking with it. Thanks.
Thanks.
The next speaker is Jessica Lorden.
Hi, everyone. Jessica
Hi.
Lorden. I somehow missed being promoted, but here I am. So let's go for it.
Okay.
Just to echo what Abby said is, the city's been talking a lot about a Vision Zero approach, and to kind of elaborate on that, it's a whole system approach. And one of the big fundamental things is it takes into account human error, right? And as an example of our wonderful drivers here in Lafayette, I'm going to do a little screen share here. This is the trail.
Yes.
On Tuesday morning. And this is a car on our trail. EB Mud had left the gate open. The driver was, I guess, inattentive. I don't know. But these are the kind of things that we really need to take into consideration as we're building this new infrastructure and incorporating Vision Zero, right? We have to take into account drivers like this, and I don't know what was going on and I don't know the circumstances around it, but I can tell you I took that picture. My kids and I were shocked. All the parents around were shocked, and it's just another thing that goes to show you that paint, or in this case paint and bollards and trail markings, aren't necessarily everything we need. So having that gate closed would have prevented this. So that's why we need several steps and several things in place to keep everybody safe as we implement Vision Zero. And I'll stop my screen share. Yes, Lynn. Oh, I shouldn't call on you. I apologize.
That's all right. Yes, Lynn.
Yeah. There may already be something like this, but I sent a note after I got your pictures this morning. Sent a note to East Bay Regional Park District asking them to get some clear signs up that let people know that that is not an appropriate place for a car.
Yeah, so I mean,
is there any marking there at all in the school area, anywhere near School Street or the entry, that tells poor, unfortunate, confused people that is not an appropriate place for an automobile? Is there any sign there at all? Mike, do you happen to know? I confess I have really never looked for such a sign, but there may be one.
They're usually posted like official vehicles only. But the irony of that is sometimes those signs are on the gate, right? And if this gate is open, then you're not going to see it. So it may be a separate and it may be different at each location and at each gate. And as mentioned, sometimes it's just bollards. So
yeah, so this one,
it's going to be different in every case.
Side on the gate, but the gate was open, and it occasionally is in the mornings.
So sorry, Stella, go ahead.
Oh, just could you clarify, Jesse, where was that?
Yeah, sure.
Where would they have entered, and what location was that?
Yeah. Okay, so this is the trail. This is paralleling School Street. So right where the cyclist is here, they're getting ready to turn left to exit the school street exit here. So we got on at Topper Court, and this is the bridge to the pumping station back here. So they, my son saw them get on, and he said they were driving, let's see, east on School Street, turned left onto the trail, made a left onto the trail, turned left towards the bridge. And then another individual said that they ended up turning back onto School Street and then reversing down the street. Anyways, I don't know I don't have that information.
And what time of day was it again?
This picture was at 8:11, which is, Stanley starts at 8:15. We're at LES, which starts at 8:30. So it was crunch time. I don't know how the car made it to even to this point without encountering oodles of cyclists and pedestrians.
Yeah, well, today was, is today Wednesday? Sorry, yeah, I'm losing track of time. Today, Stanley starts at 9:24 or so. So that was good.
No, this was yesterday.
Oh, I'm sorry. This was yesterday.
Yeah.
I see. Okay,
So,
never mind then.
Yeah, this cyclist here and this cyclist here were both Stanley students.
Okay, well, thank you for taking the picture and
Yeah.
sharing it.
Lynn?
Yeah, just a quickie. Did you happen to see him get out of there? Did he turn around? Did he back up? What did he do?
So hold on,
They always talk about women drivers, but this was a male, huh?
this was a man, yes.
Oh, nice.
And so one of the other speakers at the listening forum is one of the women who I often see on the trail, and she said they had reversed to the point of touching the cables. Okay, so they turned onto Topper School Street and then reversed into the curve, and then reversed to the point of touching the cables attached to the telephone and electric poles at the trail gates while students were making their way on bikes and foot around his car from the trail onto School Street.
I still don't know whether he backed up exactly. I can't.
So here,
So,
Did he turn around into the leaves here and then?
Lynn, I think this is something that we should talk about more later. I appreciate Jessica bringing this up, and I'm glad you identified that you took this picture. I saw a very constructive message from Sarah Grushi this morning that was passed on to us that included this photo, and I was appalled by it.
She was the one that saw the driver after this. So I had my kids and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if there was somebody was maybe intoxicated. So we just left the situation entirely.
Okay. So anyway, I appreciate you sharing this. And I also was flabbergasted by it. So, but thank you for bringing it up, and thank you, Lynn, for already sending a message, but this is something we want to consider.
Right. So moral of the story is, even when we have one preventative measure in place, we need to account for more as we start implementing these and as we work towards the Vision Zero initiative here.
Okay.
Because
I suspect that's the first in 50 years.
well, according to social media, it's not, but it's also social media. So give or take.
Right. Any other questions for Jessica? Jesse? Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
The next speaker is Megan Mitten.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I just wanted to bring your attention to the meeting next Tuesday night for the City Council. And as you've heard, that Tim Hale from CCTA is going to be giving a presentation on Vision Zero. So I'm thrilled to see that that's on the agenda and early on the agenda for Tuesday night. And I hope you'll all join. Hopefully that can answer some of the questions I personally been working with CCTA over the past several years to write their how-to guide. And so it'll be pretty informative. But something I would really hope that TransCirc listens to and thinks about is if we're going to pass Vision Zero for Lafayette, making sure that there's a policy that has actual teeth. Lafayette's actually talked about Vision Zero for a long time, but just talking about it doesn't do anything for safety. And so I'd urge you to look at the City of Alameda's Vision Zero policy that has some actual teeth to it, and I'd be happy to share that with you. That's the difference between just lip service to Vision Zero and actual implementation. And an example of that is on School Street on Marywood, where we have to think about reallocating the right-of-way and how we might have to give up parking in order to make a safe place for people to walk and bicycle. And there's a statement in Alameda's Vision Zero policy that says when right-of-way decisions are made for the city, safety will always be the priority and others will follow. And I think that would make your all collective work that you're doing very much for all these cities, your very brave and bold decision to support 4-to-1 Burton Valley, something that would actually stick rather than get overturned by staff and city council politically. So I just really urge you to follow through on learning more about Vision Zero, but also making sure if we're going to do it, that we do it with teeth, that we do it in ways that kind of hold ourselves accountable to doing it, and to put some funding associated with it as well. So thanks very much for your time and for all your work you're doing for the city.
Thank you. Stella, you have a question? Comment?
All right, need to get off mute. Yeah, Megan, could you send that Alameda resource to Mike and then he can distribute it to the rest of us?
I'd be happy to do that, sure.
Thank you.
Great.
And they're a city to be following. They're doing amazing things for Vision Zero there.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
great.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Appreciate that, bringing it up. And you kind of answered it with Alameda, but in terms of, in your opinion, in terms of other communities or jurisdictions that have implemented Vision Zero, either locally or nationally, are there others that you, again, in your opinion, consider to be a model or ones to study?
Yeah, Alameda and then Fremont, who's a couple years ahead of Alameda. The difference with both of them is actual teeth and kind of follow through, not just lip service to Vision Zero. And it fundamentally is leadership, political and city staff. When there's a lockstep partnership between city staff, the school district, the police department, and the elected officials, that's the difference maker for the cities that actually do something and achieve Vision Zero versus the ones who say it. Funding is helpful, funding is important, but Fremont's actually been doing these all with quick build, as is Alameda. So it's important and secondary, but if you don't have the political will and the leadership, it's never going to happen. And that's what we're going to need to start with here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thanks very much for sharing.
Thank you. Good night.
I see no other hands raised.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for sharing tonight. I'm continually amazed by both the volume, but also the amount of information and suggestions that we get from the public. This afternoon, I was going through a lot of emails associated with previous meetings, and there's just so much helpful stuff out there. It's a matter of just getting things done now. So, okay, let's move on to old business. We have one item on the agenda, which is the only thing we could talk about, but I did want to mention there is other unfinished business from previous meetings, specifically around the crosswalk. Stella had, if you recall that, Stella had done some counts at the BV parking lots, and we talked about this is the September 1st meeting, I believe. We talked about querying the houses and the residents adjacent to that area to get their opinion on the crosswalk and parking and so forth. So that's an open item that still needs to be done. I just wanted to point that out. Okay. Updates. So regarding on the agenda, update on transportation safety near school.
Carl?
Yeah, Mike.
Could I ask a question? So would you like that to come back to Transcirc on the 20th for discussion?
I don't know that it'll be ready. Why don't we talk about it?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me ask, what is the it? What is the it that you don't know if it'll be ready?
Getting some information from the
Which
residents.
information?
We were going to design a survey and then work with staff to have a website or something that people can give their input on the usability of the crosswalk there. And I have to go back and look at my notes.
Are you talking about the crosswalk?
At Roar.
Oh, at Roar. Okay, because we have so many crosswalks.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
There
Yeah.
at the moment, I wanted to be sure which one this was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stella.
Carl, there was another aspect was talking to the school about
Yes.
the potential to make that driveway one way, and then
Yes.
also crossing guard to man that unprotected
Right.
crosswalk.
Yes.
Yes, and Stella had measured that all, has she not? She'd been up there and counted noses and
Yeah.
cars and.
Yeah.
So if we want to discuss it, we should put it on an agenda, but
Okay.
all
Well, why don't you?
those
Why don't,
items are valid.
yeah. Let's add it to the next meeting, and regardless of what happens, let's get it on the agenda. Okay. Let's talk about the safety, the general program. I've apologized to the mayor and the vice mayor previously for the lack of progress on the schools program, safety around schools program. I want to commend Stella and Greg for doing a lot of great work around Spring Hill, and I think that there's things you might want to share about that tonight. One of the things about this we have to do is we're going to have to add another school to the list, and that's came up in an email interchange, the Mirror School, which is that has the White Pony preschool as well as going up through grades 5. And I don't know much details about it, but that will be a school that we have to add to the list.
Why do we?
Excuse me?
Why do we? It's a private school, isn't it? Do we add the
Well,
private schools? How about?
I
St.
think
Perpetual?
I think the general consensus from what I've seen in emails is that it doesn't matter if it's private, if it's a school, it needs to have some attention paid to it. I know there's crosswalks, and it's located right next to the swim club. So I'm sure there's a lot of traffic and so forth, but I don't know if you have an opinion, Mike, you want to talk about that, but I think that's something we have to at least have on the list and we can look into.
Put St. Perpetua on too then.
Yeah, well.
And then we have Bentley
the St. Perpetua is on the list already. Bentley, we had intentionally not put on because on the face of it, it looked like they had really good, circulation. But I think you're right. We should just add that. We should add Bentley to the list also, and then
we had a death there.
Mm-hmm.
A grandma was crushed by a big rig.
Yeah.
And it could have been avoided. I went around 27 times trying to figure out exactly what happens. And someday, if you want to know, I'll tell you.
All right. So I guess the end result is, yes, we need to add the private schools into the mix. So thank you for that, Lynn. And I'll talk to you about that at some point. So all that said, I wanted to get before we get into any details on Spring Hill or other schools, I want to ask the commission and public when we'll have public comment available on this item. All right, Mike? So the way it was set up was just, it's not working because of I've been constrained personally and professionally with my time, and I haven't paid enough attention to this. So I'm open to suggestions on what changes we can make to this program to make it happen faster. And that's maybe something that we can do privately by email, or we can start publicly here when we get to public comments. But if the other commissioners have thoughts on what we should do going forward, I'm open to hearing that now. Stella?
Sorry about my ghost arm there. This is actually something I put down to ask, I guess, Mike about. So I've been hearing about the city's plans to hire consultants, traffic engineers and planners. And I thought that one of the modules, as the city manager described it, was to work on this safety around schools project.
So that is correct. Thank you. You just prompted me perfectly, Stella. I finished a staff report today that recommends hiring one of 2 consultants to do. This would be what we'd call module 2, which was presented to the council at the last meeting, but we do not have the proposals back, the full proposals back from the consultants we're interviewing yet. We will have them Friday by noon. So I would encourage the commissioners to check the agenda and staff reports, over the weekend before the Tuesday night meeting. I want to point out it's Tuesday because Monday's a city holiday. So just a heads up there. So there will be a recommendation to hire a consultant, and Module 2 is in fact directed at supporting this effort and doing a lot more of the work, or at the very least teaming more hand in hand with the commissioners. So that's in the works. It can only happen so fast, but the intent is it would happen right away. Module 1 is support of the Burton Valley pilot study for as far as data and managing the study and so forth. That's also what we put on the quick build, if you will, or the quick hire. So there'll be a recommendation for those 2 items. And although I've written essentially the whole staff report, I've handed it over to Narup, who will finish it, and I'll be looking at proposals as they come in via my vacation. And we'll, kind of deliberate on who we recommend hiring based on final numbers and their proposal. And we have had interviews with these consultants as well.
Is there a timeline,
So
roughly?
the timeline is as fast as possible. So, I mean, literally, we're taking this to the council Tuesday. Normally, that staff report would have been due 2 days ago. Or 1 day ago at the latest, and it's not going to be there till Friday. And the reason is we didn't want to wait 2 more weeks to get it to the city council. So there's a placeholder, if you were to check the agenda, that basically says it'll be updated when available, and we expect that Friday afternoon. So
Okay.
You can only force things so fast.
Oh, sure. No, I understand. I was just wondering, are we talking about roughly 2 months, 3 months? To bring
No, I
someone
hope
in
sooner than that.
Okay.
I hope sooner than that. Yeah.
Sounds
Lynn, you had
good.
a
Thank
question?
you.
Thank you, Stella. Lynn?
Yeah, when was the last time we put out an ad of any kind? For example, the visa just came out. When was the last time we put out any kind of an advertisement of any sort that we need members for the circulation group, our transcirc? How long ago was that? Because we need.
So I don't.
numbers.
Yeah, I don't know if it's gone in the vistas. It is regularly in Friday updates and so forth. Basically all our commissions and committees that have vacancies, we're advertising. So it doesn't mean maybe we couldn't do more advertising. I could talk to Suzanne because you're right. You need some help, and in fact that's in my staff report.
And we've been
Right.
without them for a long time.
You have. And again, unless a application has come in I'm not aware of, we did not have any. We had some in the past, but they withdrew their application basically. So I did get an email this week, and I didn't follow up with a person interested in perhaps applying, but I think had a few questions. But I'm having a short week. I'm only here for 3 days, and I had 500 emails when I got here Monday. Literally 500. So it'll probably be a week or two before I could even follow up with that person.
That's fine. Lynn?
Yeah, you asked a question, which was how might we proceed? And I certainly like the idea of working with the traffic engineer. I don't know if he's an individual all by himself, one-man show, or if these are people from larger groups that we might borrow away, temporarily hire away or whatever. I don't know because you didn't mention that. But what I was thinking was I personally like many minds attacking a problem. I mean, look at how the listening evening came out. We got probably 18 good ideas out of that group. A lot of duplications, yes, but when you see those duplications, you've got a hot thing going. When everybody says we need this or we need that, you perk up your ears and say, boy, here's one we ought to put in there fast. maybe I wonder if we could work as a group of 5 with sort of leadership. Greg and, for example, and Stella are doing so well in the Spring Hill area, and they don't seem to me as if they need any help at all. But there are other areas. For example, you asked me if I would work with Vianney on the Lafayette School Stanley area, and I'd be happy to do that. But I think you're part of that group too, but I'm not quite sure exactly what you want me to do. I mean, I'll do anything, but I don't know exactly how to go about it. But
Yeah.
I would love to have the whole group working together, and we all go look at something. And we all try to assess how this would work. Because we all need to understand and weigh in.
Mike, you had a comment?
So for that to happen, and part of why you were broken up into subcommittees is to have a group of no larger than 3 commissioners, so that 3 of you could meet together on an item and work on it without having a meeting that is posted and notified and agendized. And maybe if it gets to the point where we want all 5, or we're going to do site walks at with everybody at schools at certain times, then we would in fact just post those as meetings, and the meeting place would be the school site at at the corner of such and such and such and such. So I caution you, you can't get to be greater than 3, or you have a quorum that's not supposed to be working together unless it's a noticed meeting.
Right.
So that was the reason for the subcommittees. Yeah. And of course it was a lot easier when you had 2 more members. And I do feel for the 5 of you. So
We feel for your 500 emails that you're getting.
Okay, so let's do this. Stella and Greg, do you want to talk, or should we go to public comment first on this item and then come back? And do you have an opinion?
I do.
I mean, I'm happy to describe what we've been doing.
Okay, let's start with you.
Can we do half and half? In other words, can we take some comments at the beginning and then let the public have an opportunity to comment after Stella and Greg are done?
No, well, let's just do it. Let's have Stella and Greg talk about some what's going on their areas. Then we'll go to public comment after that.
Okay, Greg, should I start and then jump in if I'm missing something? Okay, so Greg and I have been working really busily in August and September, and even this week, October, at gathering public comment and participation from stakeholders. We're pretty much done. We may have 1 or 2 more outstanding items to take care of, but we've talked to about maybe 20 or more stakeholders, and that includes the principal at Spring Hill, the superintendent, numerous parents, a number of neighbors, and the crossing guards. We held 2 open forum Zoom meetings that were advertised in the Spring Hill Parent newsletter. And from that, we developed a list, a kind of long list of problem statements, which are basically things that people see and that they think could be better. And so from that, we are basically going to be figuring out how do we solve those given the ideas and suggestions. And we've gotten those from a number of sources. There's the reports, the 2013 report and the 2020 report. There's TARs that we've received, as well as the feedback and the ideas from the people we've talked to. So that's kind of the nut of it. And we're working now on trying to prioritize, trying to match up solutions to problems and then prioritize them. I guess I should report, though, that right after we met with the principal and the superintendent, they found a couple things that were on their property that they wanted to just take care of. So we'll include them in the report, but they'll be marked as done, which is nice.
That's great.
So, Greg, did you want to add anything or talk about Acalanes or?
And I think that's a pretty good summary. Stella's done yeoman's work in organizing this and putting together the report. I guess then again, Mike, one of the questions is, once at least maybe the Spring Hill report is finalized, do we have an idea yet of how you, the commission, the city council, who works with the consultants on vetting, evaluating, implementing?
Yeah, I think, for Spring Hill Schools, certainly you and Stella would as part. I think that, we would screen these things and again, probably look at them on site, right? There may be, for example, recommendations and one conflicts with another. I don't know if that's the case at all, or you're screening them so that doesn't happen, but certainly there'll be a screening process. But I am hopeful that we will have this traffic firm come in and help evaluate that and screen that down. And just to Lynn's comment, we're not hiring a single person, we're hiring a firm that has multiple resources, planners and engineers and basically safety specialists, if you will. So I think that that's in our favor, and it wouldn't be just one person looking at them. I think from that we would help screen it down, and then it depends on the size of the recommendation, right? Some of these are going to be screened based on cost and ultimately presented to the council as these are the things we could probably implement quicker. You could do this if you wanted to spend more. Excuse me. Or you may have to wait. So,
Mike, I have a question. So, we went to a meeting on site. Greg was there, and Matt Luttrup from your office was there, in addition to the mayor and a number of other parties. And we talked about some striping changes that Matt sketched out. And he told me that possibly the end of October, the Release Valley Road project will have their paint crews out, and that possibly things could get folded in. So it kind of made me think about timelines and how that factors into this prioritization. If we find something that's pretty low hanging, and Greg and I feel pretty strongly about it, how we get that approved and into the plan.
So let me try and manage your expectations a little bit. That is a specific example of something that might be able to be folded in, but that doesn't mean that contractor is available to go everywhere we want striping and do things. We don't have them under just like this at-large contract. So that works out because they're literally around the corner, hopefully. And again, even that would that conflict with anything else you might come up with or recommend, or is that, yes, this is what we'd like to try? So, I mean, there are a few things that can be quicker. And part of what I wanted to look for when we're doing this is, are there any of these things that are literally just like public works work orders that I could do literally in-house? Because those are the things we can do the fastest. And those are things like putting down delineators or reflectors, maybe some touch-up paint, but not thermoplastic striping. So, there are some things like that we could do, within maybe a week or two if supplies were available. And sometimes there's, like we inquired about yellow delineators, because I know that came up as one of the suggestions around Spring Hill, for example. And even those were like a 4 to 6 week delivery time. So, even if we put them up the day after we get them, there's a little bit of lead time there.
Okay. Well,
white delineators we
Greg
can
and
get
I,
everywhere.
Okay. Greg and I will work on it in the next 2 weeks to see if we can identify that list and then pass it over. And if the Release Valley contractors have their rig there and can just walk around the corner, then that's great. Quick question to follow up on the delineators. So that was something that was discussed on that Thursday as well. And it wasn't clear to me about the process. So is that something that's an approved work order for Public Works that you'll be?
No, I'd say it's not yet. or there's some pushback on at least on where the limits would be. So I think it's something that we're probably going to try, but no, it has not been pushed through, and we have not ordered the delineators yet.
Okay, but then the decision making and the discussion will happen just administratively.
I don't know that it will on
Okay.
that one. You know, and that goes to yours and Commissioner Brown's question too. What's the process for actually getting this implemented? I mean, the process was going to be the subcommittees are doing the findings. In this case, now a consultant's going to help review them, screen them, kind of check them for yes, we think this will help. This may not be as good an idea. Also help with some costing, and in-house engineering can also help with some costing. But then ultimately, these were going to come back to a commission meeting and then a council meeting, and that gives other members of the public or even your stakeholders that were already involved with this opportunities to comment before we would do much implementation. That doesn't include some things that could be administratively just changed, like it's a good idea or it's a maintenance thing and that just should have been done anyway. There are some things that I think we can do administratively and in-house. Okay. And take those, and the striping is probably a pretty good example of one of those.
Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
Lynn, you had a question or comment?
Yes, what are we talking about? Are these spots where paint is faded? Is this new striping that we've never had before in a different place or several different places? What are you talking about, please?
Do you want me to describe it briefly?
Please, yes. I'm sure the rest
Okay.
of the public would like to know also.
Well,
And
this is really just a
want it to come back here. No, we do not want it to go into the paint bucket and onto the road until the Circulation Commission has approved it.
Sure. Well, so this is just some concepts that came up last Thursday at a meeting on site. And some of them were regarding making the visibility of a crosswalk or improving the visibility of a crosswalk at Spring Hill. It's the crosswalk that goes from the sidewalk of the corner of the school property to the pedestrian island. And so it crosses a slip lane. The visibility is really poor because of vegetation, also just because of the radius of the curve and where the crosswalk is located. And so there were some ideas about how to make the crosswalk more prominent. So perhaps moving the yield marking back up the road, as well as the shark's teeth. So that would be an example of a paint change.
Thank you.
And honestly, those are examples of things, Lynn, that we would feel comfortable doing administratively and not bringing to TransCirc. That specific example is a very good one, because those are common things that we would like to add, you know, really citywide at quite a few locations.
Right. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah. Stella brought to mind the shark's teeth. And I have asked before on Moraga Road, when we've had accidents on Moraga Road, if we couldn't have shark's teeth. I think we have them in different places here and there. The grandma that was killed over on Upper Happy Valley Road, crushed by the big rig. If we had had shark's teeth, instead they were both sharing a walkway line. She was walking the walkway line from north to south, and she was practically right on it, and so was he. There were no shark's teeth. There was no crosswalk, a space. So she was following the line. He had his nose up to the line. She was a little short person. He was way up here. Figure it out. He didn't see her. The road was tipped that way. She was coming from over here. There were a lot of bushes over there. He was looking at the truck over that way. I'd like to see shark's teeth everywhere. Not in the residential neighborhoods, of course. It's very dangerous to just have cars move right up to the line on a walkway and then have people crossing in that walkway. They all think, each one thinks they're safe within that line, and they may not very well be.
Yeah, thank you for that input. Okay. So any other comments or questions before we go to public comment?
They're ugly.
Carl, I guess I should just finish by just saying that for Acalanes, Greg and I have met with the principal. I spoke with a parent stakeholder about a TAR she submitted, and we're at the beginning phases, I'd say, of the Acalanes review and analysis.
Is that happened to be Lisa? Was it Williams?
Lisa Williams.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's good because I've been concerned about her issues that she's raised. Okay, let's take I'll call it a break, but let's blend in public comment on this is the old business. This is the safety near schools, either the process, the work that needs to get done, your suggestions of things that you know about. Go ahead, and Teresa, and bring some people in.
The first speaker is Mirabelle Connor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I am Adele Connor. I'm using my daughter's computer, Mirabelle. I have for weeks been to every school updating work that I've already done years ago. So there's some updates. And so I've studied all the schools in the AM shared commute. And I found many problems, and many of them are the same problems at all the schools. And I have found solutions to every problem, whether they're the low-hanging fruit or whether they're the bigger items, more costly items. And I think because there are so many problems that are the same in all the schools, there might be a comprehensive plan to do all the schools that have the most hazardous yet low-hanging fruit. Do those first everywhere. And what I consider, I have sent a report on School Street, and I have, Stella, I know you asked for the what I've done with Spring Hill. I've done Acalanes Spring Hill, I've done Burton Valley, I've done all these before, but I've done them again, and I'll go through my notes and get them all together. I've just been studying, so now I'll put the reports together. The thing I find the most disturbing are the crosswalks at the schools that are eastbound. They are in blinding sunrise. Reflectors, blinking lights, traffic guards, stop signs, yield signs will do nothing when it's a blinding sun. These are the eastbound. There's School Street, there's St. Mary's Road, there's Burton Valley, they're everywhere. They're on Spring Hill Road. A raised crosswalk, which I saw one at Acalanes High School. The most dangerous thing you could do probably is, in my opinion, is put in a raised crosswalk. By the time you go over that bump, and somebody's already in the crosswalk, you've hit them. So my idea is you go to all the schools and you surround each of those crosswalks unless you move them, which on St. Mary's Road and a couple others, you move them. Just remove them and move them elsewhere, so they're not in a blinding sun. Afternoon, it doesn't matter. They're not in a blinding sun then. You surround those crosswalks with speed bumps, so that the car hits the speed bump, so they're feeling something. They're not looking for something, a stop sign, flashing light. You can't see those in the sunrise. That is what I consider the first and foremost to do at all the schools, is surround each of those. And I'm not talking about just the ones in the sunrise. I'm talking about any of them around all the schools, surround them with a speed bump. And maybe some of them need a set of speed bumps. And that will slow people down before they maybe hit a pedestrian. And maybe they will then see the crossing guard, or maybe they will then see a stop sign.
Lynn, you had Lynn, you had a question.
I do. Yeah. Adele, you had favored a one-way by Stanley School, eastbound, I think it was.
Westbound.
Was it westbound? I thought you favored eastbound and then out through Topper Lane. No?
No, it was away from the school. Do not, I
So
think.
you would approach the school on Topper going
Yep.
north and then make a left turn onto School Street?
Yes,
And other people had recommended the exact opposite, huh?
because they're going to the schools. So the
Right.
way to keep people out of the schools and to get more people walking and riding their bikes and making it safe is to get them so they're not going towards the schools. So they have this choice now is to go away from the schools. Now they have to go to Topper. This was an alternative. This was just an alternative, the one way. I have other ideas for School Street. That's more of a not a low hanging fruit. That's a bigger item.
The one way are you talking about?
I'm sorry. The one way is the bigger item. That's an
Right.
alternative item. But it is it's westbound away from the school. Like, don't bring the people in, get them out, or don't come at all, because there's going to be drop off. There's going to be safer ways to get to the schools. So why make it easy for them then to go to the schools, eastbound?
Okay, Lynn, a question?
Yeah, there are two problems. One is that the parents that are dropping their kids at Lafayette School and heading south and letting their kids off into the playground, then they come out and a lot of them make a right turn onto School Street and onto then Moraga Road and wherever else they go. That would work for them then going that way.
Lynn, can I interrupt?
What?
Lynn? Can I interrupt, please, and say, I think that what we should do is get Adele's information, and then we should go through it either. But
Maybe
I don't know.
school by school.
Yeah,
As she said, starting with the most difficult ones first.
No.
well,
The
so
most hazardous ones first, which are actually the easiest ones. And like Mike said, that might actually be not, I mean, you didn't say this for this item, but that might be just a city and not a trans-cert thing is putting speed bumps around.
So Adele, I appreciated the email interchanges you've had with both, myself, but I've mostly with Stella the last few days, and Lynn. So I appreciate you doing this work, and we look forward to seeing what you've got.
Thank you.
Right.
I'll send it over as soon as I get it all together. The only one I had got together for everybody was the School Street one. And then I'll go ahead and get all the rest, including Moraga Road and Brook Street and all that. I studied Brook Street this morning, so yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Next speaker is Jennifer Paul.
Hi, good evening.
Hi there.
Thank you all very much. I just want to say thank you so much, especially to Stella and to Greg for all the work that they have been doing for Sprinkle and Acalanes. I'm just going to say, I think what's missing, and maybe some of you heard my somewhat harsh comments last week, but I think they were spoken in truth and well-founded with some frustration of what I've been experiencing. But in from having a lag from a 2013 report that was so well vetted, one of the things that was really important in that report that was done was looking at not just what we see, but how do those kids get to school? Really, like Stella was saying before, about interviewing and finding out what's the route, what is preventing parents from getting from one spot to another. And one of the things that came out of that when I was one of the stakeholders in the meeting was to really think about there's traffic safety, which is of the utmost importance. But part of that traffic safety is getting people off the street. getting the kids, there's a community to be had when you're walking and biking and going to school. And for instance, for the Spring Hill community, one of the things that was written in the 2013 report is looking at a sidewalk from Quant Road to the other, to Pleasant Hill Road on the south side. And when I spoke with the engineer, you know, the essence is there's already partial sidewalk there. There's a lot of right of way. There's a traffic calming measure that could be done to kind of slow people down. But it, you know, it does come, the answer is money. And, you know, hopefully we're having the meetings with the city about the ARPA fund, but it's just, I think we need to look at it as traffic safety and getting kids out of their, and parents out of their cars. So I'm a huge, just a push for that, you know, larger sidewalk. You're encompassing the entire Quant area on the other side of Quant, and you're getting Stanley kids who would kind of use that cut through. If you're familiar with it, there's a cut through in Quant where the old school Ellis school used to be. So that's just an example of, as Megan Mittman had said before, this commitment to saying, you know, we want to do Vision Zero and we want to get kids to school safely. But I also want to do a shout out that I've said before, which is looking at not just school sites. I think we're looking at bad intersections. I appreciate all the focus on schools, and you know, I have 2 kids in school and 1 in college, and walking to school is of the utmost importance. But during the pandemic, especially, just a reminder that so many more adults are out there walking. And if we look at who has actually been killed in the crosswalks and the roundabouts in our community and on bicycle, we do have, you know, 5 out of 6 in the last, since 2014, have been 6 deaths, and 5 of them were adults. So while we're not, you know, always looking at who is perhaps getting injured, which I think has been mentioned before in other meetings, I think that's of the utmost importance that we hear what are the near misses. I mean, I can tell you the near misses in my own family, but just a shout out to looking at the adults in the community who are walking and remembering them as well. So thank you.
Lynn?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what Hawaii does, and I guess I've said it before, but maybe we could all band together and get a petition and send a letter off to Sacramento to allow us to take it the way Hawaii does. If you've ever watched our residents cross the street, they don't look left, they don't look right, they step right out in the street, they're reading a book, they're looking at their cell phones. And the kids are doing much the same thing. Once in a blue moon, you see somebody looking both ways, and I always stop my car and shout out the window, congratulations, you crossed safely and looked. Actually, most people do not look, and they are ripe for accidents. They're just asking for it. It's a crime, actually, a terrible thing. We ought to be able to ticket people who are setting such a terrible example and setting people up for a fatality or a bad accident. It's really a disaster in our community. Very dangerous crossing habits.
I would say that there's a component to, if you're doing something like Vision Zero, you're saying to the entire community, let's all learn about traffic safety. It's not just children. I mean, I teach my kids who are now almost young adults at this point, count to 5, and they still do that. And where to stand when you're about to cross the street, because Pleasant Hill Road and Quant Road and Spring Hill, they're always running traffic lights, running reds. So I agree with you. There's a lesson to be had for traffic safety, learning and teaching for the entire community.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
The next speaker is Alec Plasik.
Good evening, Commission. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, and we can see you too.
Quickly. Thank you so much for hosting this. And Commissioner DeGiorgio, I appreciate your frank summary of the pace of this school safety issue has been really behind. I'm a 3rd-generation Lafayette citizen, and we have a real challenge on our hands, and it's cultural. And I really, really hope that this commission can take safety as a top priority. And I know you're making a real effort, but the behavior of the commission in these meetings, I went back and listened to many of them, of the commissioners, is really counterproductive. And I think there's some things that we can do to make that better. The first is I would hope that you would ask the one question, which is, what is the budget that the city has offered Mike to get these consultants? What is the consultant budget? And I would recommend that you double it, that you make sure that this commission recommends the city council that Mike has as big of a budget as he could ever imagine for pedestrian and school safety. But nobody asked, what is the budget Mike is asking for? And no one is arguing that the city fund that beyond a shadow of doubt that we have the resources. The second thing is, when we start these meetings, I don't hear anyone talk about the facts. The facts are Lafayette has 4 times the cyclist and pedestrian fatality rate of the US. That's, if you look at the NTSB data, we're not talking about that. I listened to the September 1st one right before Ashley Diaz was killed, and we talked a lot about School Street. We haven't talked about the facts. And the last thing is, I know this is controversial, but Commissioner Hinden, I really want you to consider how you're approaching these meetings. Your problem solving in the meeting is not productive. If I keep track of how much time you're speaking in these meetings compared to your other council members or commissioners, it's significant. And I really want you to think about how you can help Mike be successful in implementing the research that has already been done, but really allow the professionals to solve the problems. Thank you so much for your time.
Do you have anybody have questions for the speaker? Lynn?
Yes, it's not a question, it's a statement that the Traffic Commission, Circulation Commission, this commission, our history has been, and the community likes us to discuss all of these problems with them. It's not a matter of just turning it all over to the professionals. Thank you, though. By the way, your name is Playcheck. Are you related to Sylvia Playcheck? No? I guess you can't hear me. Can't hear me. Anyway, that's our history and it works.
I appreciate Alex's comments. I think we should always be thinking about how we can make our commission more effective. No criticism on you, Lynn, but I think it's a good question to ask. But I want to follow up on Alex's question, Mike. I know that this whole normally we would hear about the budget as part of the staff report on the next in the city council meeting. But have you discussed I assume you discussed the amounts with NAIRUP? Is the generally how you would do it or not?
So we're getting proposals, and those proposals will have budget numbers associated with them, and they're going to be what they're going to be, and they're very expensive. Consultants cost, considerable more than in-house staff, for example, but they also come with more resources and more combined expertise. So, it's potentially very much worth it. So there's no budget for this added consultant. So when we get the budget, we're going to, put it in the staff report and ask the council to authorize that amount so we can enter into a consulting services agreement and do modules 1 and 2, whatever that number is. It's a big number. I already have some information on what that will be. And I would say, had staff been given that much more extra money to put into transportation over the years, we could have supported efforts better as well. So, maybe now we're at a turning point, and the council has made safety, particularly safety in your schools, a priority for right now. And I believe they're going to fund it more substantially than we have in the past. That's just my belief. We're going to ask for it literally Tuesday night. Right. So that's just the first step. That's just for 2 tasks. There have been many tasks brought up as part of our meetings over the last 6 months. So
I wanted to ask,
we're probably headed the right way.
No, I wanted to ask that because I figured that that's what the process was, but the fact is, that if the city does move to Vision Zero, I think speakers have both public comment is correct that if we go that route officially, it's going to require budgetary commitments, and that's something that's going to have to be talked about. I don't know if it'll be talked about next Monday, but that's something that we will have to bring up. So, all right. Well, let's move to the next speaker.
The next speaker is Jessica Lorden.
Hey, me again. I will
Hi.
try to make this quick. So again, safety around schools. We're talking about how we can get people from A to B in a safer way. Again, Vision Zero is a big philosophy change, right? It's multiple ways to put these measures in place to stop accidents and fatalities. And Councilmember Hayden, I heard you say earlier when we were talking about the Bentley School, you said that each one thinks they're safe within their line. And so we're talking about in certain areas, just putting a line down. And we're saying that's all we need to keep our citizens safe. And I really strongly encourage you guys to think broader. I know we have a lot of good ideas out there. We've got different ideas in the reports. We've got lots of different ideas from the listening session, a lot of the same ideas from the listening session that were in those reports that have these multi-factor things. And so I really encourage you to think beyond paint as it comes to protecting all of our residents here.
I don't know if Lynn wants to comment, but I think her point was that wasn't good the way it was set up. That she wasn't. I don't know if you want to respond, Lynn, but I think that she wasn't saying paint's enough. But
No,
Yeah.
I wasn't.
but I thank
Okay,
you.
I
Just
apologize then, but
No,
that's
no.
how I took that. And
I
so
really appreciate you saying that. I think that what she was saying is that it would be great to have a buffer, an additional buffer on a crosswalk. That's what she was looking for. But I agree with you on
That
the
intersection needed quite a few
yeah. But I think that
at that time.
as you said, Vision Zero is really a philosophy change, and I had done some reading last few weeks on Vision Zero, and so I'm glad it actually came up. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Oh, Lynn.
But what do the proponents of Vision Zero think about the lack of education that is taking place? As the principal at Burn Valley School said, the parents play a role in educating their kids on how to walk, how to ride, how to do many things. They do crazy things when the parents think they're not going to. My third child was a daredevil, so I can understand that philosophy and how difficult that is for parents to keep track of. But how?
So I have two comments to that. The first one is that Vision Zero.
Wait, can I finish? I'd like to finish. Okay. The kids who are, for example, crossing and not looking, which they all do, most of them. Well, I would bet you 98% if somebody took a tally. And the adults do exactly the same thing. They just march right out there. They don't look left. They don't look right. They think they own the streets. They think everybody is looking out for them, and people are not. They're all busy with their own lives. Well, how does Vision Zero make that situation better? Are we going to work so hard to put engineering techniques, install them all over our city, and not expect the residents, the citizens, to do anything? They've got a personal responsibility here that we are not using.
So I have two comments for this. The first is Vision Zero is about education for everyone, pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. Right. If you look at the last and most recent fatalities and accidents, They are adults doing what they should be doing who are hit by inattentive drivers.
They're not
So
looking.
I hear that you're saying that we need to educate our children, and I agree. However, we cannot be saying that it's the fault of the kids, because how many of the adults are the ones that passed away, that died in these accidents? It's almost all adults, right? And they're doing the things they need to do. So Vision Zero is about educating everybody. And now I've lost my second point because I got really emotional about that, so I apologize. The second thing about barriers and infrastructure is that humans make mistakes, and that is a fundamental point of Vision Zero, is that you have to put these buffers in place because drivers make mistakes and pedestrians make mistakes, and we need to have multiple layers in place so that if a mistake is made, it's not a fatality. And that's what these multiple layers do.
Yep. Thank you very much for those comments.
Thank you.
We have, I think, one more hand raised.
The next speaker is Dan L.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for all your hard work that you continue to do on this topic. As you may know from a few months ago, I come on as the school crossing guard at Burton Valley. I continue to act in that role. I've also asked many parent volunteers and neighbors and friends to volunteer. And I would say that firsthand accounts, my firsthand account is on September 15th, I was near miss with a brown Toyota Prius that was too distracted to pay attention to any laws, even when I'm holding a stop sign to let kids cross the street. So, there's a lot of neighbors that are taking tallies and counting heads and bikes and cars. I would invite city staff, city council, anyone that wants to be a crossing guard, to live and breathe the role and the responsibility that has now become a very dangerous job. It continues to be a dangerous job. My frustration is that the kids do look both ways. They are helping, but it's really hard to train a 6-year-old to look left, look right without some guidance. What I'm here to say is we really need help in getting the speed humps, traffic calming measures in place. We need to get the crosswalks going. I'm just listening in tonight as a crossing guard, as a parent, as a dog walker, as a jogger, as a biker, and just to see where we are with the commission and how we've moved forward over the past 6 months. Thanks.
Any questions for Dan? Greg.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, and Dan, thank you for your comments and thank you for your service as a crossing guard. I just would like to go on the record as strongly disagreeing with Commissioner Hidane's characterization of some of the pedestrians' activities in this town. I agree that we do need to educate, all of our citizens, including our kids, on traffic safety, on pedestrian safety. But the pedestrians and the kids are not the issue in terms of how people are getting killed and injured in this town. It's the drivers. And so that's where our prominent focus needs to be, both on enforcement and improving the systems and on education, for everyone. But I don't agree with some of the what I tend to see as victim blaming in some of this. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for your comments. I don't see anybody else with raised hands. So Lynn, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, the people who aren't looking don't seem to get hit. I was not, sorry, Greg, not blaming victims. I've had family members killed also, and friends and so on in the roads. And I would never blame the victims. Most of the victims are certainly blame-free, but there are others who are not. We've been in studies whereby the drivers have already been shockingly proven, as the study, the people conducting the study had said, we're unique in California as having to stop that. We just have to stop it. They have to realize that those cars are, I don't know how many tons some of those cars weigh, but we can't let this happen. We cannot.
All right. So I thank everybody that's provided comments tonight on this item and have stuck around and listened to this. And thank you. I want to say also, thank you, Stella and Greg, for the demonstration of the process that you've done. And I'm very, very pleased with what you guys have been doing. It's been very nice to see. So thank you for that. So I guess, should we say next steps? You want to talk about that, Stella?
Carl, just one thing. When Greg and I met with Superintendent Whitmore, he had said that Burton Valley still had need, and so it wasn't clear to me if they would be included, continue to be included.
I think they should, but Mike,
yeah, he just wasn't sure who was assigned.
I'm sorry. So was that comment? I know he's there and he's in the audience, but was that comment relating to work that needs to get done in addition to what we've already discussed at BV area?
Beyond the traffic calming and the protected pathway discussion, yeah. I believe so. Yeah, he wanted to know who on the commission was assigned to Burton Valley, and I was not positive.
Yeah, originally that was originally me. So yeah, but we had kind of put that on hold given all of the Burton Valley, work that everybody had been doing as a commission. But that's something we definitely have to go back and query people and follow kind of the same process you did. A lot of the discussions we had with the public surfaced a lot of proposals, and a lot of those were, Mike and staff. We're going to do the administratively easy ones or wrap those in. So, but I think Mr. Whitmore is correct that all the schools need to have this process done, even though that there's been a BV, the previous work done in the Burton Valley. So I agree with him.
Could I just ask one more thing? For the private schools, how will we get that list? Who will identify all of them?
I mean, what schools there are?
Well, what private schools? Because I'm aware of a handful, but I'm probably unaware of some.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was raised, the schools were raised by public comment, through public comments. I don't know whether I don't know whether there's a list of private schools other than the 3 that we know about or talked about.
And then it would get down to, all the different schools you're talking about. There are other schools, there are special needs schools, there are, other education places that attract kids and that, the kids commute to and from. I don't have an all-inclusive list. Our planning department may, and because they know uses of and planned facilities. So I could inquire. I'm kind of like you all. I've just recently learned that, we've been asked to include like the Mayor School, White Pony School, as part of this. We obviously had a discussion about St. Perpetua because they had submitted a transportation action request, and that came up, and we've done a couple things there. But that doesn't mean, we've done everything there. I think it's been pointed out that, this process is probably good to do at every location, that we know of for a school. I mean, I know of.
If I might interrupt
Yeah.
for a second, I've been told that the mayor's school is still owned. Maybe the property is still owned by the Lafayette School.
It's school district property. That's correct.
Right. So, but I think that if nothing else, we should open a dialogue with the school. We'll have to figure out how to work it in. And again, what's the priority? We'll have to figure that out. Lynn?
Yeah, I'm wondering to what extent, or even if at all, some of this would be a gift of public funds to a private entity. That I don't know how that plays out when we have.
I'm not worried about that.
School, but
Mike?
I'm thinking that maybe we could invite some of the maybe a small group of parents, or maybe just notice the school that we're going to be talking about traffic issues before. We would like to hear about their traffic issues at the commission level, and invite the parents and the staff to come and tell us, what do they think they need, or if anything. Maybe they don't, but maybe they do. My kids went to Montecito when they were little kids. It's very fast around there when cars get going. But why can't they come?
Well, they could, but we're talking about the current process for the subcommittee processes is kind of what we're talking about. And so if we can gather, and a lot of the work that we started with was based on the at least two previous reports that we're supposed to go through, and then also get current input from parents. I'm not opposed to having a meeting on private schools, but I think that the process might be better served by opening a dialogue and by email and by phone before we bring it to the commission. Mike?
So with regard to contacts, I know that we have them for Mayor and White Pony, that facility, because just with the email, we have names and contact people to include in the loop. And that would be how we would, I'm sure, help us find stakeholders. They probably are stakeholders themselves, and could help us find others that maybe we haven't. Part of what we did originally was to look for stakeholders. If you all recall, staff went through any TAR we'd received for anything near a school and turn those over as a first look. And I know you've all looked at, well, who submitted this, and let's contact them and see if they want to be a stakeholder. Often they do. They typically are. Some of those people have already spoken tonight under public comment process. So, we're trying to find those people, and of course, these meetings are open to anyone, but a special invite could help. So, I mean, I think we could take it school by school, and staff is certainly willing to help find and track contacts and people and stakeholders.
And Lynn, also, I just add that I asked Mike to leave this school program, the Safety in Your Schools, as a standing item on the old business, so that we'll have an opportunity from now on to talk about it, make sure, kind of keep the pressure on, but also it'll also be a forum that people people from the schools can come in and talk about things that they see, or things that aren't getting done, or whatever. Lynn?
Would it be useful at all? I was impressed by how useful the listening night was. Would it be useful at all to have set aside a listening night for each school individually, or is that too slow? If one school or even two schools were to take part in a listening night to us, or maybe even us plus a larger group. I don't know, but would that be useful? Maybe the parents would all tune into a Zoom and
Well,
respond.
Stella has mentioned that they've had, I think, at least 2 Zoom meetings with that was publicized in the local area, and that's probably what we should do for all the schools.
Well, I wasn't thinking of just the 2, though. I was thinking of the whole commission, listening to each school. I think Greg and Stella have done a wonderful job, but
I
I'm just wondering if, I mean, they know their neighborhood pretty well. A lot of these neighborhoods we don't know that well. I was thinking particularly of Happy Valley, but I can think of other neighborhoods that have their own quirks. That we, Akalani's, right, for example, up the west end of town.
Well,
Would that be something we could do that would be useful?
I don't know. It seems like the model that Stella and Greg have worked on will get results if applied. So.
Yeah, but I think they're unique, is what I think. I think Stella and Greg are pretty unique in their methodology and the closeness that they have in their community.
I think it's replicable. So.
I mean, for example, you didn't live in Burton Valley. They live there. We don't have someone that specifically lives necessarily in some of these other school district areas, school areas.
All right, well, we'll consider that and we'll think about it then. Anything else before we close this topic? And thank you for everybody's patience on it. Thanks for the update. And again, as I said, we're going to have this as a standing item at every meeting until we get this all done. All right. Let's move on to the new business item 6A. I don't know if you want to give any thoughts, Mike, before we go through the staff report. I have thoughts on this also, just in general. But do you want to lead off?
Sure, and the idea is to get your thoughts, but this item is establishing a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit near Lafayette schools. This came up first as part of the St. Perpetua Transportation Action Request. There was some discussion about should we pursue that or not, and we did have that discussion, and then it was brought back and suggested that we do consider it, but we consider it citywide with this subcommittee work, looking at all the schools at the same time. So this is really just an opportunity to get this in front of the commission again. I included the section from the vehicle code to have a little more specific information for all commissioners. It does not apply to every street around a school that we have in Lafayette. For example, it has to be a 2-lane road. It can't be like a 4-lane road, like Moraga Road or Pleasant Hill Road, for example. But the side streets and the other streets like Happy Valley and Burton Valley, basically all the streets surrounding the schools of those more residential schools, residential streets around the schools would qualify for a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit within 500 feet of the school. And it gets a little tricky, and I have done some research, and I will lean on the consultant we hire to maybe have some more information and more experience with this. But those are for times when children are going to and from school. Now, I know of a neighboring city that has it listed as 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. And there are some, you can read kind of in the code itself, and maybe they get away with that and say, well, it's not a fully enclosed school, so there's an open gate or an open section of fence. That's kind of the nuances of this. The most common sign that you may all know of is the when children are present, right? So they have 15 miles per hour when children are present, and then it's left up to the public and the driver to kind of figure out, well, when is that? And obviously, if there's a string of children crossing, children are present, but what about when there's a few children present in the middle of the day or something? So There are nuances to this. I brought it back just so we could discuss it and get some input on, yes, we think this is a good idea to pursue. And, you know, my recommendations are just to look at this and say, maybe you have, in looking at the subcommittee work, specific streets and sort of limits that you would really like to see this applied. Maybe that answer is, you know, every street that qualifies for this reduced speed limit. And then even some discussion on, you know, if possible, could we have this from, you know, rather than just when children are present, could we have it a longer period of time, such as a 7 a.m. to 4 p.m.? By the way, that would be the biggest stretch I think you could have. I think after those times, it probably would not be an enforceable speed limit. And then you're talking about, you know, most of the streets would have a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit if it's out of those times. Commissioner Brown had a good question because I had noted we need to do a traffic survey or a traffic study. That looks like it could be accepted, but I do have that question to our attorney, and hopefully they have a vehicle code specialist. If we just by resolution said we're going to do this here, it does seem to be allowed just by resolution, even without the traffic study. But I'm awaiting an answer on that or a clarification, because in reading what other cities have done, that didn't seem to be the case. So in reading this vehicle code, it looks like it is the case. So I have mentioned that we would ultimately put this into play if we were going to pursue it with the city resolution. That is typically in our standard practice in Lafayette what makes the change in speed limit enforceable. So just open for discussion, questions that I may or may not be able to answer, but I could certainly, you know, write down and try and get answered by people that are more expert on this than I am.
All right, let's start with some questions. Lynn, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, Chuck used to have us, if we were trying to lower a speed limit, we would gradually lower it, very gradually, and little by little, and eventually get it down, because people got out of the habit then of going so fast. And then little by little, they would decrease, you know, in such little increments that they hardly noticed that they were slowing down over a year. Would that be useful for us? There are three questions I have. Would that be useful for us? And could we use that, for example, on Akalani's, on Pleasant Hill Road and on Moraga Road, just slowly, little by little by little, and not even necessarily referring to schools necessarily, just doing it. The other question is, have we taken the trucks now off of School Street and the other two, Avalon and Topper, because we were allowing trucks in there, and I think all we said was not a truck route or something, but I think we ought to forbid the trucks going in unless they actually have business there, and I don't know how we word that, but maybe. And then the other thought is, what would you think of, for example, the homes that have posted signs that say, how do they word it? It doesn't say no speeding, but it says slow down. I think psychologically they'd probably do better if it said thank you for slowing down, because people respond better, I think, to being looked upon as cooperating. And then they say, oh, you know, other people are slowing down, I guess I will too. Could we put signs requesting voluntary speed decrease along Pleasant Hill Road, the City of Lafayette, or the Akalani's High School Parents Club and Spring or whatever? Parents, thank you. Please slow down. We are requesting, you know, it's whatever wording that is asking them, please, will you do this for us? Instead of just saying this is the limit. Because
So Lynn,
obviously-
you've asked several questions. So
Yeah.
Mike, do you want to respond
That's
to
it.
that?
That's it. That's
Yeah,
all.
let me start with the first one. Gradually reducing speed, and Chuck was, very good at what he did, and he did it legally and technically. You can only reduce speeds unless you have an exception like this assembly bill that allows the 15 mile per hour near school. Currently, based on an 85th percentile and speed surveys, 85th percentile of vehicle speeds, they're actually going. That's how you set speed limits. There's always a lot of discussion, but I think it's picking up to come up with other ways of reducing speeds, because 40 could become a 45 and could become a 50 if you always just base it on what drivers are actually driving. And those are unimpeded speeds. Those aren't when school's letting in or out or when there's congested traffic. Those are unimpeded speeds. And that's how speed limits are set in California. So to reduce them, you have to reduce the speed of the average vehicle driving through there. And sometimes there's ways you can do that. Maybe you narrow the lanes a little bit, and then the speed actually just reduces, and then you take the speed survey, and then you can legally do it. So those are the ways you could do it on a Moraga Road or a Pleasant Hill Road or a St. Mary's Road or any of those other roads where the speed limit is above 25. For the residentials, it's pretty much stuck at 25. That's just what it is. And that is allowed just based on its status as a street. The 15 mile per hour is an exception near schools based on an assembly bill some years ago that allow this to happen. And that's the only one you could do by either traffic survey or by resolution or by changing your code. Trucks on Avalon Topper, I believe we have signs, but I'm not positive. I know we have it even at St. Mary's up by the junior high school, and it's basically just no trucks over a certain, I think it's like 5 tons. Enforcement of that's a little harder, and sometimes truck drivers are routed where they shouldn't be routed, and sometimes they have a right to be there because, as you mentioned, it's a local delivery. So I don't know. I wrote that one down. Now I'm curious myself, and I'm going to look for signage. But that's basically all you can do to not allow them is have the signage, and also nowadays make sure that signage aligns with the programs or the applications that people are getting their directions from, like a Waze or a Google Maps or whatever, because those applications do have truck routes that truck drivers are supposed to be following, but they're not always 100% up to date. So, sometimes a truck driver is just following directions without looking for a specific truck route or verifying that it's a truck route. The signs, it's our town, let's slow down, and slogans like that, they come and they go, and I think they can be effective, but probably on a shorter term basis. It's kind of like anything, after a while you don't see it. So they've been part of our traffic calming program for years, and you encourage a bunch of neighbors to, first of all, it's a reminder to ourselves. If I have a sign in my front yard that says let's slow down, I might even be more conscious of that and slow down. So I think they can be effective and helpful, but they're not going to stop everybody from speeding.
I wanted to actually, and if I can interrupt and ask my questions now, and I want to be a little harsh here. When I'm thinking about 15 mile an hour speed zones, first question I have is, are they going to be enforced? Is that going to be enforced? That's the first thing. Second thing is, and I think I mentioned this to one of the council members, and one of the original queries about whether we should have 15 mile zones around the schools, my opinion was, well, regarding Burton Valley, we're going to put in some physical speed humps and see if that slows down the traffic. Because I think voluntary signs is a great idea, but won't make a difference in the long run. So here's the question for you. Would lowering the speed to 15 miles an hour right near school, is that going to improve safety? Is there any evidence to show that this works?
So I think the evidence has really stemmed, I mean, is really coming out of that Vision Zero, and the quote that we've heard, or the stat that we've heard is, you know, if you have a collision with a vehicle and an active transportation user at 18 miles per hour or less, you exponentially lower the chance of serious injury or death, right? So 15 miles per hour, I mean, would you rather be hit by a car going 15 miles per hour or 25 miles per hour? There's a big difference, but even better than that is if it's going 15 miles per hour and somebody does make a mistake, you might have a better chance of avoiding a collision altogether, right? Then you could be, one of you or both of you will have more reaction time to do something to avoid a collision. So I think definitely lowering speeds is just flat out safer. Anytime you have vehicles near, pedestrians, bicyclists, skateboarders, whatever you've got, slower speeds of vehicles is going to be safer. Regarding the enforcement, I will vet this out some more, but I think the short answer is it is enforceable, and I can look into it. And it's interesting, I was on a cross-country drive this last week, and there were parts of states that had a speed limit, and then they added underneath it no tolerance. So they might have had a higher speed limit of 70 or 75 miles per hour. But if you're going 78, I take that to mean you can be cited for speeding, right? And that's not necessarily the case in California, like on a 25 mile per hour residential. If somebody's going 28, probably very few people are cited and written up, and because that ticket may be able to be thrown out in court if it's challenged. However, I think that the 15 mile per hour can effectively have a no tolerance with it. And literally, if you're going 18 miles per hour, that you could be written up. I'll research it more. That would actually be my hope, because why do it if it can't be enforced, and why do it if we don't really mean it? So
I agree. I understand what you're saying. I was getting to we've had many comments that people complain that the Lafayette police are not enforcing traffic to the extent that residents would like. And that's been discussed even at the BV town hall. And so my question was, okay, if we lower speed limits, that's I don't have an answer for that, right? But that's one of my concerns. So that we'll move on though. that was one of my concerns. Is it going to be enforced, not enforceable, enforced? The other question I had to do around the amount of money. Is this approach calling for one study to do all the schools all at once? Is that what that's, I think it mentioned citywide, right? And then on top of that, you'd have to have changes done at each school. So I just wondered if you had thoughts on doing it all at once versus on an individual school basis.
So I think the suggestion was all at once. That doesn't necessarily mean every single school has to, and every road around a school would have to be done all at once. But I think that the suggestion from your commission was, let's at least consider this, it's citywide for all schools at one time. And that doesn't mean you couldn't phase it in, but it also doesn't mean you couldn't do everything all at once. And it doesn't mean it, maybe where you have speed humps, you don't need it because you are already physically slowing them down. We had that discussion around the Burton Valley Elementary, speed humps on Marywood, for example. Where you might get speeds that are closer to 15 miles per hour anyway, because you're going to be slowed down due to traffic calming measures in the speed humps. So I would say that's kind of more part of this subcommittee work to decide that.
I don't want to monopolize. Greg or Stella? Stella?
Sorry. Okay, I was muted. I have a question. So outside of Lafayette Elementary on Moraga Road, it does say speed limit is 20 when children are present. And it looks like the posted speed limit along School Street might permanently be 20 because they're just the yellow, or rather not yellow, but they're the white speed limit signs. So do you know anything about that history?
I don't, and we've been asked about that history recently, and we couldn't find anything. So we don't know how far back that goes. So if you read, this vehicle code, there are two, there's a 15 mile per hour and there is a 20 mile per hour option as well, right? So it could have stemmed from just doing that at this location, but I think it was maybe before I've even worked here. I don't recall it changing.
I thought it was just a 15 and a 25 in the code. 15 miles.
Oh, you're
per hour,
correct. I'm sorry.
distance
No,
less
you
than
are correct.
500.
I will tell you this, when I was researching this the first time for St. Perpetua, I did read about a 20. So it's likely that this code has been updated. And I even
Okay.
mentioned it at the night of the St. Perpetua school. So if I misled everybody, my apologies, but I did read it in researching the original assembly bill. Which I had quoted the number at that time, but I don't have it with me right now. So my apologies. But at one time,
Okay.
there was definitely a 20 option.
Okay, and it's interesting that that's on Moraga Road, which this current legislation or law does not cover.
Right. It would say it would not apply. You couldn't do the 15. Right.
Yeah, well, I guess my thought was, well, if we can do 20 on Moraga Road, where else can we do 20? Some of the other roads that you mentioned, like Pleasant Hill Road, for example. I have a question, I guess, or just an observation. It seems like pretty much all of the public schools in Lafayette do not have a fence, gate, or physical barrier between the road and the school grounds. They're all open hallway design.
I think you can make that argument. I do. I'm guessing others have. Again, I'm going to push more legal minds, especially if they have more experience with vehicle code, maybe traffic law, to see if that holds water. But I think that's probably true. And
Yeah, I mean,
that's
our
kind of how I
buildings-
was thinking as well.
Yeah, I mean, none of the school sites have a single building that the kids all get put into at the beginning of the day and that get discharged.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be
Yeah.
honest. I think that's more effective to have specific posted hours. I think it's honestly more helpful for even a driver to know what is expected of them, to have posted times, right? That surround the school start and end times, as opposed to when children are present.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think they'd have to have some kind of extra awareness, maybe through a flashing light sign that's flashing at those times. I'm not so confident that
which is a method. Yeah. Some school districts have done that, where they have the flashing light, during that school commute, and it's coupled with the 15 mile per hour sign. And that is a way of emphasizing it. And that it's in effect if you're a driver as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that would have to be present. Just having the hours written on a sign when you're going by it at a 25 mile an hour to, I just don't think people will see it or even know maybe what time of day it is themselves.
Right.
So I think Carl had mentioned speed bumps or speed humps, and that effectively reducing the speed to 15 miles an hour. And I guess that was just a thought I had, which was, if we were to find locations where we were thinking speed humps would be a good solution to slowing speeds down, then how does this interplay with that?
you could have either or both, right? The thing with the speed hump is it's 24/7. Obviously, it's not just during school times. You could couple it as well, and it sort of force people to meet the 15 mile per hour because they're going to slow them down going over speed humps. Of course, some people in some cars can drive very fast even over speed humps, right? And then dependent on the distance between the speed humps, you can accelerate pretty good in between some of those stretches as well. It's, you just have to work at it a little more. And I don't believe most people will. They'll just maintain a lower speed, so they're not having to accelerate hard or decelerate hard for the next speed hump if you've got multiple speed humps working together.
Yeah, but some people do. But yeah, well, I think that the enforcement part is really key because, we see people speeding past speed limit signs all over the city. And just having a new one up that happens to have a different speed miles per hour limit, I don't think that will necessarily slow people down or change their behavior to meet that limit. So that's, I guess, really a issue or question for the police department and what their capabilities are. And then I guess also for the city council with respect to what their priorities are. I do know that the past couple weeks, the police have been enforcing limits, and I'd seen them on Moraga Road. And going 20 miles an hour, I have to say, when there's no congestion on Moraga Road feels very, very slow, which is good. But again, when there's no congestion, people are not used to driving that, even if it's during school hours. And when there's no enforcement happening, I think people just drive whatever their average speed is. Again, when there's no congestion, when it's not stop and go in the morning. So I guess, last thought I had is there are a lot of streets that this could apply to. And I looked around at all the different school sites, and I'm not really sure how you measure 500 feet if you have to make, say, a turn. So you could take a look at Lafayette Elementary and First Street. Obviously, you go 500 feet from either corner. But then what about Monroe, which comes right in there too? Do you go 500 feet down Monroe? Same thing maybe on School Street, where if you start at measuring at the corner of the school closest to the trail, does that send you to Topper? And is that effective to change the speed limit for a small part of a segment of a road? So I guess that's an observation, just that our road network here is kind of funny. And I'm not really understanding, I guess, how this 15 mile an hour speed limit would be applied to some of those situations like Topper, Monroe. I think there's one opposite Happy Valley, Panorama Drive, etc. Do you know?
So,
do you have any?
Yeah, I think it can apply to portions of, for example, Topper and Avalon. Okay, because as the crow flies, are you within 500 feet of any part of that school? Okay, so
Well, it should be street segment length, not crow's fly.
Well, I don't think so. I think it's as crows fly. And then it's a road segment that obviously is impacted.
Okay, well, that's a good question.
So, like, I don't think you have to go, for example, for Stanley from the entrance on School Street and go 500 feet. It also applies on Topper because you're running along the side of the school. It also applies on St. Mary's. Because you're running on the side of the school. It's that whole perimeter, and you can go out 500 feet from that perimeter.
Yeah, and I assumed it was out along the road network, 500 feet from the perimeter of the school.
Yes, but I think that's still, that still may get you, 1/4 of one street. And then you would look at that and say, does it make sense to have 1/4 of one street, and how does that play out, or is that more enforceable or not? So, and as you're driving towards the school, you'd pick up that sign and you'd have to slow down. And as you're driving away, you'd pass that sign and you could speed up, right? Somewhere in the middle of the street. So, I mean, there's a practicality on how a driver would be able to know when can I go faster or slower, 25 miles an hour versus 15. So I think there is a strategy in placing signs as well as just slowing traffic near schools.
Greg?
Just a couple of questions, because I would like to hear public comment on this. Mike, thank you, and Carl, thank you for checking with Mala to see, whether it is eligible, to do it to 15 without the study. My read is that it is, but I think city attorney should review that. And also, I don't think it makes a huge difference for our discussion tonight, but assuming that there is some recommendation to city council, I think it'd be helpful to have a map with all eligible streets that city council has reviewed and approved, that we believe would meet, subsection B1A, that may be eligible. And I agree the practicalities, but at least to determine the universe of eligible streets, so that city council will have that information. I don't know that we need to get that specific tonight, but that would be my ask and recommendation to you, Mike.
No, I think that's a good ask. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, somebody's going to have to go through some process to map it, but I think that's a great idea and that we should do that.
Yeah. If there's no pressing questions for Mike, I want to bring the public comment portion. Thank you, Greg. I was also going to do that. So I see 2 hands raised on this topic. Why don't we start listening to public comment, Therese?
The first speaker is Abby Faithman.
Hello, Abby.
Oh, hi. How are you?
There we go.
Good evening
Yes.
again. I just want to join and say I'm supportive of this reduced speed limit. I think it should be across the board where we could apply it reasonably. And as Mike spoke about earlier, and has been talked about at other meetings, the slower a car is moving when it collides with someone, the more likely we are to not have a horrible outcome. It doesn't eliminate that possibility, and it also doesn't guarantee that cars are going to be slowing down, but it does give us another tool in the toolbox to help inform the public. It also gives us another tool in the toolbox to prosecute people who are driving badly. But let's see, I have a few comments that are well, not necessarily all connected, but I think we should focus on setting the stage for the police to be able to follow through on their responsibilities and keep our citizens safe. I think it's clear that we don't have a track record of police consistently enforcing speed limits, but if we don't have those speed limits in place, they're certainly not going to enforce them. So I think as a city, as Trans-Circ, as city council, we need to set the stage for what our expectations are of residents and people, how they drive through our neighborhoods. And that will then give the police the tools to enforce and also allow us as residents and council to provide direction that this is a priority to do the enforcement. So I think I agree that enforcement is a huge issue, but I also think we need to set the stage and move forward with or without that enforcement so that we can call out the police to do their jobs. I think, for people who participated in the listening session, Carol Singer provided testimony that she was following people through Burton Valley at speeds of over 40 miles an hour. If I was the chief of police, I would have been horrified to hear that Carol Singer was tailing people through a residential neighborhood exceeding 40 miles an hour. It's bad enough that people are driving it, but that residents feel like we aren't believed when we say people are really going fast. So I saw Mayor Candel's face sort of look a little horrified when she heard that testimony, but I think it is true, and other people are saying it too, and Carol Singer is saying it. So if that carries more weight, bully to her. I also agree with what Mike's saying about the speed bumps. I think it is fine to include 15-mile-an-hour speed limits with speed bumps. People speed up in between speed humps. They don't necessarily maintain 15 miles an hour across the corridor that they're traveling. And we already have the signage in place with the speed bumps. It's not more signage, it's more sign, because we have 15-mile-an-hour slow down. It's a speed bump before the speed bump. There's a sign at the hump. It's not a significant change in what the signage would be. So having that as an enforceable mileage would be reasonable to me, to have those paired together. I have seen in other places that cities do blitzes of enforcement. They have mutual aid from other cities and they'll have 20 enforcement officers out. And I think maybe that's something we might want to consider. But as we look at this, I would encourage us to do this citywide all at once. We have a major citywide campaign on education coming from all the schools, from all the city communications, from everywhere. So it's not like, oh, just in Happy Valley, they're doing enforcement. It is everywhere. Everyone is slowing down and we are changing our behavior as a community. So I would encourage us to do this citywide without delay and set the stage for police to do their jobs and residents to do their jobs at driving safely. So those are my thoughts.
That I appreciate. Those are good thoughts. Any questions for Abby? Thank you for sharing those.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
The second speaker is Jennifer Pohl.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
I completely support reducing speed limits. Coming from myself as a Pennsylvania native, we always had 15 miles per hour and the blinking lights at all of the school sites. I just wanted to maybe draw your attention, as I'd said before, I believe history is really being lost in a lot of the work being done here. And in January 13th of 2015, then Superintendent Rachel Zinn sent a letter to the Lafayette City Council and to, at the time, Circulation Commission, before it was TransCirc, talking about items that had been vetted at that time by Officer Larry Salika, who had been a youth officer, a number of traffic community members, superintendents and school board members, and all of that. And one of the things on that list, and I'm reading from the letter, is for the all Lafayette School District school sites to install permanent flashing lights and or flashing signs around all school sites to alert drivers to pedestrians. So while I appreciate this, this thought, it isn't new. And maybe just like we had done in the past on the city website about the history of the terraces under hot topics, I think that right now transportation is safety is an extremely hot topic. And I would suggest, and I'd be happy to share any information I have because I've been kind of keeping track of it, but looking at offering the city and perhaps at least TransCirc and City Council, even if you don't want to make it that public, all the history of what's being asked. So again, just throwing that out there that, in 2015, in January of 2015, this was mentioned from the superintendent to install flashing lights at all the school sites. And I agree with what the last speaker just said. I would completely support this being an all city effort, from the school boards to the city council, the commissions, the residents, the police, and saying, I would love to see us being leaders in this, and really in the entire area where people would be looking to us because we are making it such a priority. So thank you.
Any questions for Jennifer? And thank you for that history. I have gone back to I've gone back and asked for old documents that I couldn't find online. So if you want to send that to me, I'd be happy to look at that. And we should talk about, we'll talk about, there is a, hold on a second, Lynn. There is a website with all the past studies and stuff on it right now. I don't know if you knew that or not, but
yes, I've seen it. Thank you.
Yeah, we could certainly amend it with other materials.
Great,
Lynn?
thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of material in that more track packet that I gave you too, very thick.
Yeah, and that's online. That's online too.
Hmm?
That's
Yeah,
online too.
no, I'm just telling you that you've got other, and whether there's extra that's not online, I can't begin to tell you, but if you want to look through that, it could be useful.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Jessica Lorden.
Hi. So just to kind of rewind a little bit, one of the big things that we've been talking about is enforcement with this 15-mile-an-hour speed zone. And my big concern previously was, Chief Aldrich stood up in the town meeting for Burton and said that unless you're egregiously breaking the law, you're not going to get a ticket. And I feel like in the last several weeks after our awful incident here on School Street, that's really not the case. All of a sudden we went from no police presence in the area, and now we have a lot. And the first couple of days I was angry and upset because I felt like they weren't enforcing anything. But now that I've had some time to reflect, I think there was just too many people breaking traffic laws for them to enforce it all. Now they've been out here for, what has it been, 3 weeks? We're coming up on 4 weeks straight. And there, aside from the car on the trail, there have been a lot better drivers in the area. We walk every day, and I think having the police presence is a reminder. And if we can get them, as the other speakers have said, in a citywide, this blitzkrieg effort out for 3 or 4 weeks, it has to be long enough to regrain and retrain people. I really think a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit is completely enforceable, and we can definitely retrain our drivers to do that.
Any questions, comments? I thank you. I appreciate that input.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. So, good discussion. Any other, before we go forward, any other additional comments or thoughts the commissioners have? Any other questions? Okay, Stella, mute.
Okay, sorry. Well, yeah, just that the recommendation in the staff report is that we suggest candidate street locations, but I think that kind of loops back to the question I had before about expanding our scope for safety near schools studies, which is we need to know what the schools are to be able to suggest candidate streets.
Right.
So I can tell you that the vehicle code does apply to private schools. I didn't have that in mind or that scope until, we recently got some suggestions to add private schools, right? But I can tell you that this law applies to private schools. So it doesn't have to be a public school to have the 15-mile-per-hour law. So it's certainly within your purview to recommend those sites as well.
Greg?
Okay.
All right, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Stella.
thank you.
I'm sorry, Stella.
Yes, still, I agree. It'd be helpful to know, although, again, as I was kind of intimating before, I mean, I from my perspective, I think it makes sense to, I'm leaning towards a broader mandate, to all sort of eligible areas, where it makes sense from a traffic and safety standpoint, to all city schools. And again, I think Mike and his team and, Mala will have to review what is eligible. But, I guess I think from our perspective, I don't know that we necessarily need to get into the details as opposed to perhaps making a broader endorsement and recommendation to city council, as to what we would like to see.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. And I was just going off of the staff report recommendations to suggest candidate streets. So my point was just, if staff is going to take a broad approach and identify the actual streets as you'd suggested, Commissioner Brown, that they make sure that they incorporate every single school site within that analysis.
Yeah. I've been working on a potential resolution here as we've been talking about.
Good. Okay, good. I'm glad. Lynn, did you have any final comments? Otherwise, I want to say I appreciate what you and the speakers have said. I don't want people to misconstrue my concern with 15-mile-per-hour laws being enforced with my belief that reducing speeds at all around schools is useful. And to the point of what Mike, you said, I was aware of the slower speeds below a certain mile per hour greatly improves the chances of pedestrians surviving or being less hurt. So I just want to make it clear that my objection or my comments about enforcement is a practical statement, not really against the idea. Okay. So I agree with Commissioner Brown that a map would be useful. And I'm really hoping that Mala will come back and support the idea that we don't need to do traffic studies, because I would like to do my approach would be to do all the schools all at once, have a big publicity campaign, something to really wake people up at once, rather than school by school. I think that was my feeling going into this, is that publicity is going to be a big part of this. So, okay. Any other comments, Lynn?
Yeah, I was just thinking about funding all these speed humps. And I remember how long we waited for Carroll Lane to come up on our long list of a turning lane. We didn't have a turning lane at Carroll Lane for a long time, many, many years. So I'm thinking maybe we could put these, if we can't fund them all, we could maybe put them on a waiting list. And question for Mike, are there ever grants for funding? Is there anything whereby we could apply for grants to do speed humps around several schools?
So there have been historically.
Apply and maybe have a chance of getting it.
So we have better chances of getting some smaller grants, like in the $50,000 range, which might do 8 speed humps. The Safe Route to School, which used to be kind of its own grant, has been lumped with, a larger grant that we just aren't going to compete well for. Mm-hmm. At least the big money. So, but even without the grants, I mean, I think there are some things that we can do here that we probably, the city should get behind and pay for. We're 15-mile-per-hour signs is a relatively inexpensive thing, and select strategically placed speed humps are not a lot of money each. They're maybe $6,000 each, basically. We're not talking about millions of dollars. We're talking about tens of thousands, even into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but citywide, to potentially, protect a pedestrian, a bicyclist, a bicycle, a skateboarder. It would be worth it. So I mean, so I think those are the things that I think we want to kind of boldly ask for. And, you know, reconfiguring street alignments and adding pedestrian bridges that really truly will add over $2 or $3 million cost for one thing, maybe is the harder thing. But, you know, this is the type of thing you can look at, you know, citywide. And I know that's part of what your subcommittee work is looking at. So this is just, as mentioned by speakers tonight, this is just one more tool in your package of things that you're looking at. You know, it's a way of reducing speed and hopefully enforcing a reduced speed.
All right, maybe one more question, Lynn.
Well, it wasn't going to be a question. It
Oh,
was
okay.
only a statement that
Okay.
we have in our past had neighborhoods that have contributed the cost, sometimes the full cost of speed humps for their neighborhoods. So that's another option for funding or partial funding, maybe matching or something like that. City pay half, the neighborhood pay half. Or just, you know, voluntary people kicking in money just to speed up the process. I'm just trying to think.
We've had all that. Yeah.
This.
We've had all that before, but right now we're talking about safety around schools. And I think that, you know, we've left that up to maybe neighborhoods, in part because we felt like it was probably the neighborhood people that were making the problem. And, you know, if they can't police themselves, then we'll force them to police themselves. And they bought into it and said, we'll police ourselves by putting speed humps here and pay for it. So that is part of our traffic calming guidebook from, you know, 2003. Those are the policies that we'd have. The residents actually pay for the speed humps themselves. I did have a sentence in my staff report that will come out Tuesday in hiring the consultant. And actually, I should probably save this for the next item, but I think we should revisit that policy.
Right. I don't mean to cut you off, Mike, but I think, Greg, I think we should accelerate this item.
Yeah.
Greg?
Yeah, so I thank you, Carl. I agree. And, you know, we heard about speeds near schools during every phase of the Burton Valley discussions and hearings. We have heard City Council express an interest in it. And, you know, again, my idea is that we endorse it to as broad a concept as possible. And to that end, I would offer a motion that it's different than what the recommendation was, but again, I think it gives Mike and staff and City Council time to figure out what streets are actually included. So I would make a motion that the commission endorses the concept of reducing speed limits around all city schools during designated hours and encourage City Council to reduce the speed limit to 15 miles an hour on all city streets that are 1, eligible under state law, and 2, where appropriate from a traffic flow standpoint. And furthermore, to encourage or to ask City Council to encourage the police department to appropriately enforce such reduced speed limits.
Is there a second and then we have discussion?
Second.
Okay. I like what you had prepared. I would also like, as part of this, if it's possible, any action on a 15-mile-per-hour citywide. I would like to know if we can have some sort of publicity campaign, how that will go, instead of just posting the changes. So is there something we need to add into that proposal, Greg, around publicity campaign or education? Or is that going to be part of Vision Zero or something else?
I believe we could appropriately amend the motion to include an education campaign around the reduced speed limits, as well as in conjunction with that, police enforcement of such speed limits.
Thank you.
Second.
Stella? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Stella?
Just a question. So the certain times, is that broad enough to cover either when children are coming or going from school versus when they're on site but not in a fenced condition?
Yeah, so I guess my
Yes.
concept was what Mike said, rather than do when children present, but during specific designated hours to the maximum extent allowable. Be that 7 to 7:30 to 3, 4, whatever it may be, but that whatever's appropriate under state law.
Lynn?
Yeah, in Scottsdale, where my daughter lives and where my grandchildren went to school, it's a 4-lane road and it's a very busy arterial, but the police hit it hard. The first 2 weeks, they don't have to do anything after that. All they have to do is, the little signs we got up on St. Mary's Road in front of the community center that says yield to pedestrians and, slow, whatever. That's what they have on their major arterial. They just put it in the middle of the road and people see that sign and my goodness sakes, they're little puppies just sort of crawling along. And then as soon as they reach the edge of the school grounds, they speed back up again. But it's an amazing thing to watch. But it's the same thing when people see tickets being given around schools or any location. The people see that, and then it really lightens the police role because they don't have to do very much after that. I think I told you before that Rudy Dager, after we had a child, he wasn't badly hurt, but he was hit over in the Spring Hill area. You have that island over there now, but that was a problem. Rudy went over there after we passed that and he gave 200 and something tickets in about 3 hours or so. And boy, we didn't have a problem on that road for another 10 years.
All right, so we have a motion as amended, that had been seconded and amended. I'd like to do we need any other housekeeping or can I just call the vote? All right, I'm going to call the vote on this proposal. Greg?
Aye.
Stella?
Aye.
Lynn?
Aye.
And I'm an aye also. So it passes unanimously, 1 absence. Thank you very much, Mike, for this staff report and guiding us through this. I agree. One more tool in the toolbox. So let's move on to commissioner and staff updates. Mike, do you want to go first, or do you want to call commissioners for first?
I just want to call your attention. I don't have staff reports or updates, but I wanted to call these out, and they're on the agenda. Updates on transportation action requests, because we haven't done updates in a while. Mapping this 15 mile per hour and coming up with these things and responding to some of these transportation action requests is going to be dependent on us getting likely consultant help. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to mention that not only a consultant to do those modules that we were referring to earlier, but also another consultant to act as our in-house staff while we don't have staff in-house right now, because we need somebody to actually manage that consultant who's a transportation person. So we are seeking both consultants to do those tasks, those modules, and also an in-house person that may work, in an office from Walnut Creek or Oakland or whatever, but basically represent and actually staff this commission as if they're our own city staff. So we're looking for that, and we could use that person because here are some examples of things that we've been looking at or I've been receiving, emails regarding safety in your schools in response to tragic vehicle pedestrian collision. Lynn, thank you for your notes on the listening. I think that was nice how you broke that down and you got everybody's name who spoke, and I know that there's going to be a breakdown of not only the public speakers, like at the listening feature, but also all the emails we've received regarding this, for the most part, have gone through our city clerk, and she's putting them in a folder, and somebody's going to go through and read all of them. I've skimmed probably, well, most of them, if not all of them, but I haven't analyzed them all or gone through them. And we will need a staff person to do that. And it will support what you're doing with your subcommittees as well. We have a transportation action request for a traffic signal on Deer Hill Road at Oak Hill Road. You may or may not know that that was also one of the recommended features in the downtown congestion study. My response to the person that submitted that is that's a $500,000 ask.
Can we get a grant?
And actually and we probably will not get a grant, I'm just saying. But if we were to get a grant, it will be because we have somebody like a transportation planner who is finding it and is creative and is applying for it. We need that help as well. So Leah Greenblatt used to give us grants. Now I've mentioned multiple times we're not competing well for the same types of grants that she actually got us in the past. They're kind of by the wayside, but it doesn't mean there's nothing out there. We will always keep looking. So actually that congestion study had not just Deer Hill at Oak Hill, but Deer Hill at Oak Hill and Deer Hill at Happy Valley. So it'd be a combined, and I think they had a cost of $750,000, and that would be over $1 million now. Just so you know. So we have a request for a flashing beacon crossing.
Mike,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you? Because
Yes.
I know you're going through this list, but I actually wanted to. We're getting late. I want to ask, what's going on with the Burton Valley pilot? Are there delays or anything that we need to know about?
There are delays. I have a contractor, I have a price. It was more money than I had estimated, but they were ready to go. But we have been directed to get better baseline data, and that will not start until we get that consultant on board, who in turn will need sub-consultants. So that's what's going on with it. I think it's a good idea to have better baseline data that's as accurate as possible. And then we can compare it to actual data, exactly a year later, and have some measurements throughout the pilot study. So I think it's a good idea, but that's why you haven't seen, signs installed and speed humps installed. It's not because we didn't line everybody up. It's because we've been told to get this data, and that's what we're going to do.
Then another question I had was, in the past, I'd asked the question of, is there any way to share staff with, like, for example, the planning department? I know in an interim basis, can you borrow somebody's half of FTE for a couple of weeks until you get people going on?
So the planning department would like to borrow some engineers to help with their planning right now. We're both in the same boat.
Right.
You may or may not be aware that the city is having a consultant evaluate our staff for efficiencies, for staff gaps, for recommendations on things like maybe we should use more consultants. The planning staff currently has some contract planners. We don't have I'm talking about having a contract transportation planner or traffic engineer or both, right? It's not something that engineering has done, because for the most part, we've been able to do in-house, city staff. But obviously we have not done a great job in the transportation planning traffic engineer category the last 3 years, because we've gone through 3 people, and we've had large gaps in between, as you know, and we haven't had a lot of candidates interested in working here and doing this job. So they don't have anybody to share with us. We don't have anyone to share with them. We're asking for more
I thought that
people.
you'd say that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I had to ask.
So we will likely find these people if we pay consultants. The billing rates for a traffic engineer, just so you know, are $240 an hour. It's a very expensive, consulting fee. They have junior staff that can do some of the work at obviously lower costs than that, maybe down to even $135, $150 an hour. But nothing would be as cost effective as having that in-house expertise and just having a full-time person. We know that we have more than full-time work for this job, particularly now. It's been mentioned tonight. This is a hot topic. Transportation and safety is a very hot topic, and rightfully so. So,
okay, all right, Lynn.
Yeah, this is not exactly about staff, but it's a question pertaining to what we were talking about before. I meant to ask you, a boy was hit a few weeks ago at the intersection of Victoria and Moraga Boulevard. And I've forgotten which.
Let me just rephrase what you just said, because yeah, the way I did hear about that accident was a boy hit a vehicle going the wrong way without a helmet on an electric bike. Okay. So
interesting.
That's what I heard.
Burton Valley. That's what it was in Burton Valley also.
No, it doesn't, it can go both ways. It is my only point in that statement is we have definitely had some drivers that are at fault, but we still have to be careful as bicyclists and as pedestrians and other active users as well, and still follow, vehicle codes and safety rules.
Is there anything in Vision Zero that addresses education of children about bike safety?
Yes, there is, Lynn. Vision Zero is intended to be an all-encompassing, almost just a mind shift, and definitely there's an education component as part of Vision Zero.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mike, I sorry I cut you off, but I did read through your list, on the agenda, and unless commissioners have any questions of you, I'd like to know, Stella or Greg, do you guys have anything else you want to share tonight? Otherwise, I'd like to conclude the meeting. Nothing? Okay.
Well, sorry, I was just looking at Mike's list. Okay, so we're just going to take them as just what they are in the list and just understand them as they are.
It's just an update of what I have that is pending, right? We've done basically no work on all of these. Some of these are going to be, I'm sorry, we can't do that because this is $1 million ask. Some of them maybe we had a discussion about reducing the speed limit and how you can and can't do that. I've had a request to basically just go change the speed limit. I've had to explain I can't legally just do that. There's a process. That's on here. And then a couple of the little ones, the red curb painting, I've administratively done. The last one is the only one that's done. So I'm sorry. That's an example of something that we can just take care of administratively. So there's a lot of work pending in addition to all the schoolwork you guys are looking at.
Are you talking about Burton Valley or another list? What list are you talking about?
On the agenda, Lynn, there's a.
But I looked at the agenda. What?
On the you have to look at it.
Yeah.
Oh, item 7A.
Oh, I see 7A. Yeah, I got it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's just a list of some. Yeah, that is some pending transportation action requests. Just so you are aware that I've seen them, right? But they haven't been brought to you yet, and they will take some staff before they get there. And again, a couple of those the update from staff will likely be, we've just denied it for these reasons, but they are on a longer term, larger list that at some point will be funneled up to the city council, just like these signals really were already one time as part of the downtown congestion study.
Okay, I have one final question, Mike. I'm just one to know, are there any improvements that we're going to see administratively on School Street in the coming weeks? Or are we waiting for consultants and analysis to be
No.
performed?
I'm not aware of anything we're going to do without, I mean, honestly, it's still in the realm of this consultant to help the subcommittees and come up with, you know, recommendations citywide, but at this particular school as well.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Glenn?
Yeah, question, on the subject of the item 7A, where you have the traffic signal on Deer Hill Road at Oak Hill. I don't know how many people are aware of it, probably Mike is, but that particular signal has been requested, urged, all kinds of stuff. It meets the warrants. We have accidents that were horrible at that intersection. One girl, I think she said she was hit and due to the sunshine that Adele was talking about, and was in the hospital for months and months and months. It's a bad intersection. And if there's anything we can do to get a signal there, it needs it desperately.
Well, we'll have to think about that. I mean, I know that's been discussed in previous meetings also. But
Well, other commissions, I mean, other circulation varieties also have discussed it. And we've come close, but the commissions have always voted it down, and it shouldn't be voted down. It's a terrible situation there.
we'll have to look for a way to bring it
Particularly in
back
the
for
morning.
discussion. Okay. Greg, anything else?
Even Don Tatson's wife came to a meeting and said, please get this approved, and was turned down.
Well, could be if there's enough demand. And yeah, Stella.
So Carl, just to give a quick GPAC update.
Yes, thank you.
GPAC has been working through the mission statement, suggestions for revisions to council, and that's wrapping up. So if anyone here at the commission or any viewers in the public want to follow that or give some more input, there'll be a meeting in late October, October 21st, about the mission statement update. And also generally GPAC is working right now on defining the housing element goals for the housing element. And within that will be upcoming meetings to talk about the programs that would meet those goals. So again, if anyone has any interest in any of those, attend some of the GPAC meetings. And you can find those meeting schedules on planlafayette.org.
Thank you for that update. And I appreciate you that you've been our representative there. I've been hearing about the GPAC work from other sources, and it's a big process. So I'm glad you're involved. Thank you. All right. I don't think there's anything else we can talk about tonight. But for the record, thank you, all of you, for your efforts, including Mike and Therese. And I'm going to call this meeting as adjourned at 9:44 p.m.
Thank you, Carl.
Good night, and
Thank
have
you.
a great
Good night.
Have a great night.